Everything changes when you're no longer available to an avoidant. Let's talk about something a lot of people feel but rarely say out loud. You've been showing up for someone who keeps their distance. You text first, you make the plans, you give the benefit of the doubt. And they stay close just long enough to keep you interested, then pull away just as fast. That pattern is emotionally exhausting. And here's what's worse. You start thinking it's you. That maybe if you said it differently, dressed better, cared less, they'd finally commit. But what if I told you it was never about you doing more? What if the most powerful move isn't chasing, it's stepping back? See, avoidant people fear closeness, but they crave it too. They want connection, but only on their terms, when it's convenient, when it doesn't ask too much of them. So, when you're always available, they never have to grow. They get the comfort of your presence without the cost of real vulnerability. But everything changes the moment you stop being their emotional safety net. Not out of revenge, not to play games, but because you realize your energy deserves reciprocation, not confusion. And when you step away, something surprising happens. They feel the shift. Because now they're faced with a reality they never prepared for. You're no longer holding space for their indecision. Some will step up, others will fade. Either way, you win. Why? Because you stop investing in someone who treats your availability as an assumption, not a privilege. And in that space, you create room for someone who chooses you clearly, not cautiously. Avoidant partners often live in a paradox. Surface, they seem independent, self-sufficient, and even emotionally composed. But underneath, there's a deep fear of intimacy. This isn't always easy to spot at first. In fact, early on, they might seem incredibly attentive or interested. They'll charm you, connect with you, maybe even express vulnerability just enough to draw you in. But as the emotional stakes rise, when the relationship begins to ask for consistency, openness, or deeper emotional engagement, they start to retreat. This withdrawal isn't always dramatic. It can look like delayed replies, lack of follow-through on plans, avoiding emotional conversations, or simply becoming busy. And if you're emotionally invested, you start making excuses for them. You tell yourself they're just stressed or they've been hurt before. And while that might be true, the key issue is that their pattern creates emotional instability. You feel like you're always walking on emotional eggshells, trying to say the right thing, be patient enough, or prove you're safe for them to open up to. The avoidant attachment style often develops from early life experiences where emotional closeness wasn't consistent or safe. So, as adults, these individuals cope by limiting their emotional exposure. They keep a part of themselves walled off, even from people they care about. And the cruel irony is that even though they want love, they're terrified of what it demands. They associate closeness with risk of being judged, controlled, rejected, or overwhelmed. So they keep people at arm's length, even while wishing they could feel closer. For someone with a more secure or anxious attachment style, this behavior is confusing. You keep them asking, why won't they just let me in? Or what did I do wrong? The truth is, you're not doing anything wrong. The avoidant partner is wrestling with their own fears, but instead of addressing them, they subconsciously pull away when things feel too intense. This creates a push-pull dynamic that can leave you feeling unseen and undervalued. And the danger here is that the more you chase their closeness, the more they withdraw. They read emotional pursuit as pressure, which triggers their need for distance. So, despite your best intentions, trying harder only reinforces their fear. You're stuck in a loop where your desire to connect feels like a threat to them, and their need for space feels like abandonment to you. This emotional mismatch can quietly erode your self-esteem as you begin to question your worth in a relationship that rarely feels mutual. When you're always available to someone who is emotionally avoidant, you unintentionally reinforce their comfort zone. It's not that your love or support is wrong. Your consistency is a beautiful trait, but in this dynamic, it often gets taken for granted. Availability becomes assumed, not appreciated. The avoidant partner learns that they can withdraw, delay, distance themselves emotionally, And yet, you'll still be there. You'll still text first, still show up, still make the effort. And while you may think that showing up consistently will eventually make them feel secure enough to open up, in reality, it can do the opposite. When there's no consequence to their withdrawal, no shift in dynamic, they never have to confront the discomfort that comes from their avoidant behavior. Why would they change if they don't have to? But emotional avoidance works for them. It allows them to maintain a sense of control and independence while still enjoying the benefits of emotional connection thanks to your effort. You're doing all the emotional heavy lifting while they stay at a safe distance. They never need to grow, never need to lean in because you keep closing the space for them. What starts to happen is a subtle imbalance. You begin to feel like you're overdoing in the relationship, overthinking every message, initiating most conversations, making emotional space for them while rarely getting the same in return. The relationship starts to revolve around their comfort, their timelines, their emotional bandwidth, and because avoidant people often struggle to acknowledge their own patterns, they rarely recognize how much they rely on your emotional labor to keep the connection alive. They don't see how your constant availability masks the actual instability of the relationship. By always being there, you unconsciously send the message that their lack of emotional engagement is acceptable. Not only does this fail to challenge their avoidant tendencies, but it also creates a dynamic where you suppress your needs to maintain peace. You tolerate inconsistency in the hope that your loyalty will eventually inspire change. But the truth is, nothing challenges avoidant behavior more than space, not punishment, not pressure, just space. When you step back, they are forced to feel the discomfort they've been avoiding. Only then do they face a decision, lean in or let go. Until that happens, your constant presence only teaches them they don't have to show up fully because you'll keep filling in the emotional gaps. Taking a step back from an avoidant partner isn't about manipulation. It's an act of self-respect. There's a huge difference between playing games to provoke a reaction and creating distance to protect your emotional well-being. When someone consistently avoids intimacy or connection, continuing to show up for them without boundaries isn't noble, it's self-abandonment. And at some point, the cost of constantly being emotionally available to someone who resists closeness becomes too high. It chips away at your self-worth, your clarity, and your sense of balance. Choosing to step back is about reclaiming those things, not trying to punish or teach someone a lesson. When you've been trying, giving, adjusting, and holding space for someone who keeps you at arm's length, it's easy to believe that one more act of patience or one more kind gesture will finally break through. But avoidance isn't broken by kindness, it's confronted by reality. And sometimes the most powerful reality check you can give someone is your absence, not in a cold or vindictive way, but in a calm, grounded decision to no longer overextend yourself in a one-sided dynamic. It's important to understand that avoidant individuals don't respond well to pressure. When they sense expectations or emotional intensity, their default reaction is to pull away further. But if you step back without drama, without blame or ultimatums, you change the dynamic completely. You remove the emotional safety net they've grown used to. Instead of reacting to your demands, they're left with space. Space that feels unfamiliar, maybe even unsettling. And that discomfort can be a catalyst for reflection because suddenly they're no longer being rescued from the consequences of their emotional distance. You stepping back also shifts the focus back onto you, your needs, your energy, your growth. You stop measuring your worth by how much you're willing to tolerate and instead start honoring what you actually deserve. That energy shift is powerful. It communicates without words that your time and presence are not automatic. That emotional intimacy is earned, not assumed, and that you are no longer willing to participate in a relationship that leaves you feeling unsafe. This isn't about withholding love, it's about offering it to yourself first. And when you lead with that kind of self-respect, you stop chasing people who can't meet you where you are. You stop trying to convince someone of your worth and instead hold space for someone who already sees it. Your absence speaks in a language that presence never could. When you step back from someone who has grown used to your emotional availability, it creates a void, one they didn't expect. For an avoidant person, that shift is more than noticeable. It's disruptive. They've grown accustomed to your presence being a constant. You initiate the conversations, offer the support, do the emotional labor, and in doing so, you make it easy for them to stay emotionally distant without facing the consequences of that distance. But when you stop showing up the same way, when you create space, they're forced to feel something they've been avoiding all along: accountability. Avoidant individuals tend to disconnect when relationships become emotionally demanding. It's not always conscious. Their instinct is to withdraw, to protect themselves from vulnerability, from dependence, from expectations. But when someone is always there, reliable, forgiving, available, they don't have to examine this reflex. Your consistent presence allows them to avoid the discomfort of their own pattern. They don't question their behavior because it's never truly cost them anything. But the second that changes, the narrative shifts. Suddenly, you're not there to answer the text right away. You're not the one trying to fix the awkward silences or chase the next plan. The silence they use to control now feels unfamiliar, maybe even unsettling. This shift creates an emotional mirror. When you stop cushioning the impact of their avoidance, they're left with the emotional consequences of their own behavior. It's no longer about you reaching for connection. It's about them confronting what they've done with it. Some will feel discomfort and pull away further. Others might begin to reflect, maybe even reach out. Either way, you gain clarity, not by pushing for answers, but by giving space for truth to surface. Your absence becomes the test they never expected to take, and it reveals whether they're capable or even willing to meet you emotionally. And this clarity is vital. It helps you break free from a dynamic built on guessing games and emotional scarcity. You learn more in silence than you ever could in chasing. Because when someone truly values you, your absence won't be met with more silence, it will be met with presence. Not perfect presence, not a complete turnaround overnight, but effort, real intentional effort. And that distinction between someone who misses the comfort you gave and someone who actually misses you becomes clearer than ever when you stop showing up the way you always did. The right person doesn't make you beg for clarity. They don't keep you guessing about how they feel or where you stand. When someone is emotionally available and ready for a real connection, their presence is consistent, not conditional. You don't have to earn their affection by proving yourself over and over again. You don't have to shrink yourself, walk on eggshells, or overanalyze every word you say. Instead, there's a steady kind of peace, a mutual understanding that both people are choosing each other fully and willingly. When you've been entangled with someone avoidant, that kind of security can feel almost unfamiliar. You've gotten used to working for love. You've internalized the idea that emotional connection requires struggle, that inconsistency is normal, or that uncertainty is just part of the package. But the truth is, love isn't supposed to feel like chasing. The right person doesn't need to be chased. They show up, they communicate, they may not be perfect, but they're present. And more than that, they want to understand you. Not avoid the parts of the relationship that require vulnerability or effort. In a healthy connection, your needs aren't seen as burdens. You don't have to dim your light to be tolerated or shrink your emotional needs to maintain peace. The right person doesn't shame you for wanting closeness. They welcome it because they want it too. They understand that intimacy isn't built in moments of charm and chemistry. It's built in consistent actions, honest conversations, and mutual care. They aren't afraid to let you in because they've done the work to let themselves feel safe being known. If you've been with someone who pulls away every time things get real, it's easy to think you're too much. But you're not too much. You've just been offering your heart to someone who wasn't emotionally equipped to hold it. And when you finally step back from that dynamic, when you choose not to fight for breadcrumbs of attention anymore, something powerful happens. You start holding out for someone who meets you, someone who doesn't make you question your value, someone who brings clarity instead of confusion. That shift is where everything changes. It's not about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone emotionally mature. sure. And when you've experienced that difference, you'll never want to go back to guessing or overextending or hoping someone might eventually choose you, because the right person, they already will. So if you've been caught in a cycle with someone who keeps you at a distance, someone who dips in just enough to keep you hoping, but not enough to truly stay, it's time to remember your worth. You don't have to convince someone to choose you. You don't need to perform emotional acrobatics to keep someone's attention. When you step back from chasing, overgiving, or holding space for someone who won't meet you halfway, you step into your power. You send a clear message, not just to them, but to yourself. My love is not a consolation prize. It's a gift. And it belongs with someone who's ready to receive it fully. The moment you stop showing up for someone who avoids connection, everything changes. Not because you're playing a game, but because you're finally playing by new rules. The ones where you stop abandoning yourself for the hope of being chosen. From that place, love becomes less about proving and more about aligning, less about surviving emotional distance and more about building emotional intimacy. So protect your energy, trust your gut, and remember, someone who's right for you won't need to be chased. They'll meet you where you are without hesitation. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your heart to this message. I hope it reminded you of your value, your strength, and the kind of love you truly deserve. Until next time, be kind to yourself, stay rooted in your truth, and never settle for a connection that makes you feel small. Take care, and thank you.